The darkness behind the door. In October 2016, I was forced to find a new roommate after a falling out with my previous one. I decided to let Jordan, a colleague from the cafe where I worked, move in with me. We rented an old house on the outskirts of Asheville, North Carolina, a quiet place surrounded by dense forests. The day I went to Jordan's grandmother's house to help him pack, I sensed a strange atmosphere hanging over the place. The elderly woman had piercing eyes and spoke frequently of the spirit world and the entities lurking within it. She warned us about the shadow figure, an entity that watched people as they slept. When she took my hand to read my palm, she suddenly frowned, muttering unintelligible words before whispering, "You should not go with him. That house already has an owner." Her warning sent a chill down my spine, but Jordan brushed it off, saying his grandmother was just superstitious. I dismissed her words, unaware that I was about to walk into an unending nightmare. From the first few days in the house, I felt a strange pull. Specifically, I was inexplicably drawn to Jordan's closet. It was just an old wooden wardrobe, but I found an eerie comfort in sitting alone in its darkness. Some nights, I woke up realizing I had dozed off inside it without remembering when I had gone in. At the same time, Jordan began experiencing recurring nightmares. He told me that every time he slept, he saw a tall, shadowy figure standing in the corner of his room, grinning unnaturally, its eyes glowing in the darkness. First, I thought it was just a coincidence until I, too, started seeing the same figure in my dreams. Strange things continued to happen. Objects went missing and reappeared in different locations. We heard scratching noises from inside the walls, and the house seemed colder than usual, even though the heating was on. Jordan claimed he sometimes heard whispering voices at night, but whenever he turned on the lights, the sounds stopped. On Halloween night, I performed a small ritual to pay respects to my ancestors, but perhaps I had unknowingly opened a gateway to something else. That night, I returned home drunk from a party. When I entered the bathroom, I saw a woman in a gray dress standing in the corner, her long hair partially covering her face. In my intoxicated state, I whispered Bloody Mary several times. Jordan heard me talking to myself and tried to open the bathroom door but couldn't, despite it being unlocked. When he finally managed to push through, he found me standing motionless in front of the mirror, murmuring to the darkness. From that night on, bizarre occurrences became frequent. The protective necklace with a goddess pendant that I had hung on my bedroom door was cleanly cut in half, as if by a sharp knife. Jordan repeatedly saw a long-haired woman gliding from the bathroom into my bedroom. Even when I wasn't home, whenever I stood in the kitchen, I felt the presence of someone walking right behind me, their steps perfectly synchronized with mine. One night, as I was heading upstairs, I saw a pale face with glowing eyes peering down from Jordan's ceiling before it fell toward us. We both ran from the house in terror. On multiple occasions, Jordan's dog refused to enter the house. It would sit on the porch, growling at the doorway as if sensing something inside that we couldn't see. The few times it did come in, it always kept its tail tucked between its legs, whimpering softly. One evening, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom door creaking open, thinking it was Jordan. I called out, but there was no response. Suddenly, I felt a weight press down on my chest, as if someone was sitting on me. I gasped for air, my body frozen in place. The room was pitch black, but I could sense a presence looming over me. Then, just as suddenly as it had come, the weight lifted, and I was able to move again. Everything escalated to its peak one night when we were in the living room. Jordan's dog suddenly jumped up, growling, then bolted upstairs in apparent panic. Jordan rushed after it but didn't return. Worried, I ran up to find him. His bedroom door was jammed. I had to push with all my strength to get it open. When I finally did, the dog darted out, trembling with fear. Jordan sat in the middle of the room, his eyes vacant, muttering incoherent words. When I tried to pull him up, he suddenly stared past me, his eyes widening in terror. "Get out of here!" I turned and realized I was standing directly in front of the closet. The door creaked open slowly, revealing an abyss of impenetrable darkness. A chilling wind poured out, carrying whispers from an unknown realm. As I dragged Jordan away, I felt unseen hands grasping at us, trying to pull us back. I could barely lift my feet. When we finally escaped the room, I noticed 3 long scratches on my arm, fresh and bleeding. The next morning, we packed our things and left the house immediately. From that day on, we never experienced any paranormal phenomena again. Looking back, I believe that house wasn't just haunted. It had belonged to something long before we arrived, and we were merely intruders in its domain. But I always wonder, if I return, will that closet door still be open, waiting for me? Even after moving away, strange things continued to happen. I would wake up with bruises in the shape of handprints on my body. Jordan started talking in his sleep, whispering things that didn't make sense, words in a language neither of us recognized. He had no memory of it the next morning. One day, I received an anonymous email. The subject line read, "Do you still dream of the closet?" The message contained only one sentence: "You never really left." I deleted the email, but the feeling of being watched never faded. Every night, I slept with the closet door shut and the lights on. And yet, sometimes, I woke up to find the door slightly open, as if something had been peering out at me in the darkness. And then, one night, I heard the whisper again. The shadows in the desert. In 2006, I made the fateful decision to leave the inland empire behind, seeking a fresh start in the quiet town of Red Hollow, a remote place in the high desert of Arizona. The house I found was a Spanish-style home built in 1993. It was charming, spacious, and seemingly perfect for a new chapter in life. However, the house had a history, one that was left untold by the real estate agent. I would soon learn that some places are never truly empty, even when no one is living in them. It began with small things. My black and white cat, Luna, would often sit at the entrance to the hallway, her yellow eyes wide with something I couldn't see. She would sit there for hours, completely still, as if something in the darkness of the corridor held her attention. Every time I followed her gaze, there was nothing there, just the long, shadowy hallway stretching into the depths of the house. But something about the way she stared made my skin crawl. First, I dismissed these feelings as paranoia. The house was old, and the desert wind howled against the walls at night, making the wooden beams creak. But then came the sounds. Some nights, when everything was silent, I would hear soft shuffling on the carpet. It was faint, almost as if someone barefoot was pacing the halls. The first time I heard it, I convinced myself it was just the house settling. The second time, I checked every room, finding nothing. Then, my cat's behavior escalated. Luna became restless, clawing at my bedroom door in the dead of night, her meowing turning into a desperate cry. I let her in, and she would immediately curl up beside me, trembling. One evening, my son, Daniel, walked into the kitchen with a confused expression. "Mom, did you leave any meat out?" he asked, sniffing the air. I frowned. "No, why?" Something smells rotten, like blood and raw meat. I searched the entire kitchen, nothing. No spoiled food, no trash left out. But the smell lingered for hours, thick and putrid, before disappearing as suddenly as it had arrived. And then came back. The smell wasn't the only thing that returned periodically. Objects in the house began moving on their own. A brush would shift from one side of the vanity to the other. My son's toys would appear in different rooms than where he had left them. The front door, which I always locked at night, would be slightly ajar in the morning. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, I glanced at the mirror, and for a split second, I saw something move behind me, a dark shape, low to the ground, almost crawling. It vanished the moment I turned around. The worst was the hallway. I began to dread walking through it at night. The feeling of being watched was unbearable. At times, I felt a presence so strong that the hairs on my arms would stand on end. Once, I swore I heard a whisper, my name spoken in a hushed, almost playful tone. One evening, my daughter, Emily, was outside, skipping rope under the porch light. It was just after sunset, and the desert air was cool. Then, she screamed. I rushed outside, finding her frozen in place, her face pale with terror. She pointed to the roof, unable to speak. My heart pounded as I slowly looked up. Two glowing red eyes stared back at me. The shape was large, hunched, covered in dark, matted fur. It perched on the edge of the roof, motionless, watching us. And then it moved with unnatural speed. It scuttled across the roof and disappeared behind the house. I grabbed Emily and ran inside, locking the door. That night, I barely slept. Every small noise sent a jolt of terror through me. But what disturbed me the most were the scratches I found on the porch the next morning. Deep gouges in the wood, too large to be from any animal I knew. The nights became unbearable. Daniel began having night terrors, waking up screaming about a man in the corner. Emily refused to go outside after dark. Luna, my once playful cat, refused to enter the hallway and would growl at the empty space. Then, the knocking started. First, it was soft, just a faint tapping on the walls. But as the days passed, it grew louder, more insistent. One night, as I lay in bed, I heard it at my bedroom door, a steady, rhythmic knocking. I held my breath, my heart pounded. Then, the doorknob turned. I shot up and grabbed the lamp from my nightstand, prepared to defend myself, but when I yanked the door open, the hallway was empty. That was when I knew we had to leave. The night before we left, I was awoken by something much worse than knocking. Presence was in my room. I felt it before I saw it. The air grew thick, heavy, pressing down on my chest. My breath came in shallow gasps. Slowly, I turned my head. A figure loomed in the darkness. It was tall, its limbs impossibly long, its face hidden in shadow. But its eyes, those glowing red eyes, burned into me. I tried to scream, but no sound came out. My body was frozen, paralyzed with fear. Then, it stepped closer. It reached for me with elongated fingers, its nails sharp and black. I wanted to move, to run, but my body refused to obey. Just as its hand was about to touch me, I blacked out. I woke up the next morning drenched in sweat. My arms had long, thin scratches that hadn't been there before. The house was eerily silent. I didn't wait. I gathered my children, our belongings, and we left that place behind forever. Even after we moved, I felt its presence. In my dreams, I would see the hallway, the glowing eyes staring from the darkness. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I wake up gasping, convinced that something is still watching me. And sometimes, when I close my eyes, I swear I can still smell the scent of rotten, bloody meat in the air. Some places in this world are not meant to be lived in. Some places belong to something else. And no matter how far you run, some things never let you go. The Curse of Blackwood Manor. In the summer of 2023, I and two of my closest friends, Nathan and Julia, decided to take a trip to the historic Blackwood Manor in Ravenhill, Massachusetts. The world had finally returned to some form of normalcy after the pandemic, and we were eager to explore places that had long been off-limits due to restrictions. Little did we know, our visit would turn into something we would never forget. Before Blackwood Manor was built, the land had been home to indigenous tribes who believed it to be sacred ground. However, in 1871, the land was acquired by a wealthy businessman, Elias Blackwood, who made his fortune in the steel industry. He built a grand 28-room estate for his wife, Margaret, and their 3 children. The home was adorned with treasures from around the world, collected during Elias's extensive travels. However, tragedy loomed over the Blackwood family. Margaret died under mysterious circumstances, and although Elias promised to never remarry, he later wed a woman named Lillian. Rumors swirled that Margaret's death had been no accident and that she had cursed Elias before passing. Blackwood Manor remained in the family for a century until the last descendant, Abigail Blackwood, passed away in 1973. With no heirs, the estate was left to the local university, which converted it into a museum in the early 1980s. The manor was well known for its supernatural occurrences, particularly among the students assigned to work there as overnight caretakers. One such student, Rachel, lived in the manor during her senior year in 1998. She spoke of strange happenings that defied explanation. Every night, soft knocks could be heard coming from a large wardrobe in the servants' quarters. After researching the house's history, Rachel discovered that a cruel housekeeper had once locked a child inside as punishment. The piano in the grand parlor would sometimes play on its own, sending eerie melodies echoing through the empty halls. The spirit of a woman was often seen drifting through the upstairs corridors. When compared to old photographs, witnesses claimed she bore a striking resemblance to Abigail Blackwood herself. A visiting researcher, skeptical of the ghost stories, once mocked the legend of Abigail. That night, he awoke to find his bedsheets wrapped tightly around his neck, as though someone or something had attempted to strangle him. A security guard reported hearing a stern voice command him to leave my house. Overcome with fear, he fled so quickly that he left his shoes behind. Many believed the vengeful spirit belonged to Margaret Blackwood, furious over Elias's broken vow. Our tour of Blackwood Manor was led by a university student named Erica. She seemed hesitant when we asked about the paranormal rumors, brushing them off as old wives' tales. Yet, as we ascended to the second floor, her demeanor changed. We reached a door at the end of the hallway, one that was firmly locked. As we stood there, a loud knock came from inside. The sound was so forceful that the floor beneath us seemed to vibrate. Julia and I exchanged nervous glances, while Nathan laughed uneasily. "Who else is in there?" I asked. Erica's face paled. "No one. I don't have a key to this room. No one does." A sudden chill filled the air, making the hair on my arms stand on end. A creeping sensation of being watched settled over us. Though there was no one else in sight, we continued the tour, but something had changed. The house no longer felt like a historical landmark. It felt alive. as if it was observing us just as much as we were observing it. Later that evening, as we prepared to leave, I had the strangest urge to whisper a quiet thank you before stepping out of the grand doors. Perhaps it was my way of showing respect, of ensuring that whatever dwelled in Blackwood Manor remained there and did not follow us home. However, the experience stayed with me. That night, I had a vivid dream of standing in the manor's grand hall, watching the shadows flicker and dance on the walls. The tall, gaunt figure stood at the foot of the staircase, staring at me with hollow eyes. It did not move, but I could feel its presence pressing against my skin like a suffocating weight. I woke up drenched in sweat, the room colder than it should have been. Julia and Nathan had eerily similar dreams, both describing the same shadowed figure watching them. Days later, strange things began happening in my apartment. Objects moved without explanation. Doors creaked open on their own. At night, I swore I heard faint whispers, as though someone or something had followed me home from Blackwood Manor. One evening, as I was brushing my teeth, I caught a glimpse of something in the mirror, a blurred, dark figure standing just behind me. When I turned, there was nothing there, but the feeling of being watched never faded. Even now, months later, I wake up at 3 a.m. sharp, as if something is calling me back to Blackwood Manor. Blackwood Manor remains one of the most chilling sights in Massachusetts, with reports of unexplained phenomena continuing to this day. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, one thing is certain: some places are never truly empty, and I fear that, no matter how far I go, Blackwood Manor remembers me. If you ever decide to visit, be sure to show respect. Never mock the spirits, never challenge the unknown, and most importantly, when you leave, make sure you are truly alone, because something might try to follow you home. The nightmares never truly stopped. Even though I tried to forget, I often found myself drawn to researching more about the manor, only to uncover even more disturbing tales. Some visitors claimed to have seen the shadows moving, whispering, almost beckoning them to return. I started keeping a journal of my experiences, and every so often, I'd find an entry I didn't remember writing. The words "come back" appeared over and over again. One evening, my phone buzzed with a notification. A picture had been sent from an unknown number. It was a photo of Blackwood Manor, but there was something in one of the upstairs windows, a dark figure staring directly at the camera. I haven't been able to sleep since. The mysterious visitors of Winchester House, nestled in the quiet outskirts of Blackwood, Vermont, stood the grand yet aging Winchester House. Built in 1875, this towering Victorian home had housed generations of families, each leaving behind whispers of their past. It had seen life, death, sorrow, and joy, and while I wouldn't go as far as calling it haunted, it was certainly visited. Spirits seemed to pass through like travelers on an endless journey. Some, I suspected, were former residents stopping by, while others felt more like strangers drifting between realms. Most were harmless, curious, but then there were the inexplicable moments. I called these the "what the hell" files. These were the things that left me staring, questioning reality, wondering how and why they happened. My apartment on the second floor, the downstairs residence, and even the basement had all been stages for these strange occurrences. And over the years, I started collecting these stories, hoping that perhaps one day, someone would have an answer, or at least take comfort in knowing they weren't alone. It started one autumn afternoon when I decided to rest. Not sleeping, just lying still, letting my mind wander. That's when it happened. a sudden tingling, like I had walked through an invisible spiderweb, sent a chill through my body. A deep, piercing sensation of being watched overtook me. My eyes flew open, and there he was, crouched beside my bed, his face level with mine. Was a man, early 20s, maybe 25. His sandy blonde hair peeked out from beneath a flat cap, and he wore a thick blue fisherman's sweater. His complexion was ruddy, wind-worn, his eyes kind, yet bewildered, locked onto mine. "May I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice carrying a crisp British accent. Then, just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone. No warning, no sound, nothing. I wasn't afraid. Startled, yes, but not afraid. What struck me more was his confusion, as if, in some other time, in some other reality, I was the one who wasn't supposed to be there. I wondered if, in his world, he had simply been putting something beneath his bed, only to look up and find me, a stranger, lying where he should be. The thought haunted me more than the encounter itself. Strange things didn't just happen in the bedroom. The kitchen had its own set of bizarre occurrences. One morning, I noticed a small white button, half of a collar button, resting in the middle of the sink divider. It was old, delicate. I didn't own anything like it. A week later, an unsettlingly sweet smell filled the kitchen, cloying and rotten. I traced it to the cabinet above the stove, climbing onto a step stool. I opened the cabinet to reveal a pool of black. Sticky goo pooled on the second shelf, thick like molasses, but there was no leak, no sign of it dripping from anywhere above. The shelf above was completely clean, and yet, here was this black sludge, sitting ominously on the wood, as if conjured from nowhere. The living room played host to its own peculiar activities. A small yellow plastic ball, the kind used for cats, appeared one day. It was about the size of a ping-pong ball. I didn't own one, yet here it was. I blamed my cat, Felix, for knocking it around the house. Except Felix was an indoor cat, too lazy to even follow me to the porch. And yet, the ball moved from room to room, sometimes vanishing for days before reappearing. Then came the smells, a whiff of jasmine, fleeting yet unmistakable, a scent of cherry pipe tobacco that would linger for minutes before vanishing, as if someone had just walked by, smoking, but no one had. And then, the books. I had a stack of books, some I had designed, others just waiting to be shelved. I stacked them neatly, yet every so often, the top book would change. It was always one I hadn't read in years, almost as if something or someone was leaving me a suggestion. While the upper floors of the house were home to odd, but mostly harmless, activity, the basement was different. It was colder than the rest of the house, not in the way that basements often are, but unnaturally so, a biting, deep cold that settled into your bones. The worst was the feeling, the heavy, pressing sensation of something standing just behind you, watching, breathing, waiting. I avoided going down there unless absolutely necessary, and when I did, I never stayed long. The most unsettling event happened late one night. I had dozed off in the living room, my book slipping from my hands. A sudden, sharp noise jolted me awake, like a chair scraping against the floor. I sat up, heart hammering. From the hallway, deep in the shadows, a figure emerged. A woman, dressed in old-fashioned morning attire, black lace covering her face. She moved slowly, deliberately, gliding toward me. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Then, just as she reached the edge of the light, she stopped. Slowly, she lifted one hand, reaching for me, and then she was gone. The room fell silent once more. I never saw her again, but I could feel her, watching, always watching. I still live in Winchester House. The strange occurrences continue, some subtle, some impossible to ignore. I no longer question them. I accept them. After all, some places are never truly empty. Some places hold onto the echoes of those who came before. And some houses, they remember. Thank you for spending your time with us tonight, exploring these mysterious and spine-chilling stories. If these tales have sparked your curiosity or left you with unforgettable feelings, don't hesitate to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've had similar paranormal experiences that you'd like to share, feel free to send your story to the email address provided in the description. Who knows? Your story might become part of our journey into the spiritual world in a future episode. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any of our haunting tales. See you in the next episode, and remember, always keep a light by your side.